The rain in Milan doesn't fall. It attacks. A cold, horizontal assault that turns the elegant, fog-wrapped city into a labyrinth of shimmering black, streets and blurred golden light. I hunched my shoulders against it, my fingers numb where they clutched the strap of my worn leather satchel. The bag, heavy with my future and my past, thumped a familiar, desperate rhythm against my hip. Late. I was catastrophically, unemployably late. The bus had broken down, my phone had died, and the address for the nanny, interview, scrawled on a damp piece of paper in my pocket, felt like it was dissolving, just like my last chance. "Please, just one taxi," I whispered to the neon-drenched night, my breath a stolen puff of fog. But the taxis were ghosts, streaks of occupied yellow light vanishing into the watery darkness. A sob of pure frustration clawed at my throat. This job was the thin, fraying rope I was clinging to. After 6 months of a grief so thick, I could taste it like cold ash of bills piling up like silent accusations. In my sister's empty apartment, of friends' pitying looks that scraped me raw. This was it. A live-in nanny position for the Moretti family. A room of my own. A purpose. A reason to get up that wasn't just because the sun had the nerve to rise without Mia in it. Another sleek car hissed past, a wave of icy water soaking me to the knees. I gasped, stumbling back onto the curb. My glasses fogged into 2 white circles. Blind, shivering, and utterly defeated, I wiped them on my sodden scarf as a long, black vehicle, silent and imposing as a shark, glided to a stop a few feet away. The rear passenger window was tinted an impenetrable obsidian. It wasn't a taxi. Nothing that looked like that felt like that, could ever be mistaken for a cab. It whispered of money and menace, but my panic was a louder voice. The back door swung open automatically, revealing a slice of dry, warm, cedar-scented interior. An invitation. "Grazie, grazie mille!" I cried out to the empty street, not waiting for a driver, and threw myself inside. I landed on butter-soft leather that sighed beneath me. The door shut with a muffled final thunk, sealing me in a cocoon of sudden, profound silence. The storm's roar became a distant murmur. Relief, hot and dizzying, flooded me. "Driver, please, I need to get to Via Monte Napoleone number 22. "I'll pay double, I swear." The words died in my throat, frozen by the atmosphere. I was not alone. In the shadowed seat opposite, a man watched me. The faint light from passing street lamps sliced through the interior, illuminating him in stark, fleeting fragments. A sharp jawline, shadowed with dark stubble, a mouth set in a hard, unsmiling line, eyes that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, fixed on me with an intensity that stole the air from my lungs. He wore a suit that was clearly worth more than my entire existence, the fabric draping over broad shoulders with a silent authority. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He was a presence so dense with latent power it pressed against my skin. This was not my ride. Oh God. I'm so sorry," I stammered, fumbling for the door handle. "I thought, the rain. My fingers scrabbled against smooth leather and polished wood. There was no interior handle. A cold, different kind of dread began to pool in my stomach. A low, calm voice broke the silence, smooth as the leather I sat on, yet edged with a blade of frost. "The door locks upon closure. A security measure." His accent was pure, cultured Italian, but beneath it lay an American cadence, a subtle hardening. "You have entered my vehicle. Uninvited." It was a mistake, I breathed, pressing myself against the door, my soaked coat squeaking a pathetic protest. "Please, just let me out. I'll go, I'm no one." "You are a woman who throws herself into a stranger's car during a storm in the Brera district," he observed, his gaze never leaving my face. It felt less like being looked at, and more like being scanned, assessed for threat and value. "That is no one. That is either very foolish or very desperate. Which are you?" "Desperate," I admitted, the word torn from me. I couldn't lie to those eyes. They felt like they could see the 6-month-old wound still weeping inside my chest, the eviction notice folded in my bag, the ghost of my sister's smile I was trying so hard to honor. He was silent. The car moved smoothly through the rain-slicked streets, not stopping, taking me further from Via Monte Napoleone, deeper into an unknown Milan. Panic, sharp and serrated, sawed at my nerves. I have an interview, I said, my voice trembling. For a job. I'm supposed to be a nanny. I need to be there. They'll think I stood them up. Please. Something shifted in his expression. A minor flicker, like a stone dropped into a still, dark pond. A nanny. He repeated the word as if tasting it, testing its weight. Yes, for the Moretti family, on Via Monte Napoleone. I used the name like a talisman, hoping it would mean something, that it would convey I was expected somewhere, that someone might report me missing. The man's expression did not change, but the atmosphere in the car chilled by several degrees. The Morettis, he said, and the name was a curse wrapped in silk. You will not be going to that interview. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a decree. My heart hammered a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Who are you? Before he could answer, my sodden, overstuffed satchel, wedged between my hip and the door, chose that moment to give up the ghost. The buckle, strained and old, snapped open with a pathetic pop. The contents spilled across the immaculate floor of the luxury car with a sound like a crashing chandelier made of paper and regret. A cascade of my life poured out, a half-eaten protein bar in torn foil, a worn copy of Goodnight Moon with Mia scrawled inside the cover in my handwriting, a bundle of unpaid utility bills held together by a rubber band, the small framed photograph of my sister Sophia, her smile luminous, with a laughing baby Mia, and, most damningly, spilling from a manila folder, dozens of crisp color-printed-out articles, my pediatric nursing articles on neonatal sleep patterns and developmental milestones, and detailed highlighted notes on tetralogy of Fallot. Mia's condition, the monster that stole her. I let out a cry of dismay and dropped to my knees on the floor of the moving car, scrambling to gather the embarrassing, intimate debris of my existence. Heat flooded my cheeks. This man, this king in a suit, was seeing the pathetic sum of me. My failure. My love. My desperate studying hope that somehow all this reading would turn back time. I didn't see him move. But suddenly his hand was there, long-fingered and elegant, plucking not the bills, not the photo, but one of the printed medical articles from the floor. He held it under the soft reading light. His eyes scanned the dense text, the yellow highlights on post-surgical care for infants, on monitoring for cyanosis, on the precise calibration of medication for fragile hearts. The car went preternaturally quiet. Even the sound of the engine seemed to fade. I froze, a bundle of Sophia's old receipts in my hand, watching him. Slowly, very slowly, he lowered the paper. His gaze lifted from the text to my face, and the intensity there had transformed. The cold assessment was gone, replaced by something fiercer, more primal. A desperate, hungry hope that mirrored my own from minutes before, but laced with a terrifying power. You are a nurse. His voice was different now. The frost was still there, but beneath it ran a current of raw, volcanic urgency. Pediatric, I whispered, confused. I haven't worked since... I couldn't finish. He ignored my shattered sentence. His eyes dropped to the photograph of Sophia and Mia, then back to my face. This child. She had a heart condition. It wasn't a question. I felt a stab of protective anguish so sharp it was physical. She did. Yes. I couldn't bring myself to elaborate, to offer up my most incredible pain for his inspection. The man leaned forward, the movement predatory yet coiled with a shocking vulnerability. The space between us vanished. I could see the gold flecks in his dark irises, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand as he held my printed article. "What is your name?" he demanded, the command softened by that tremor. Elara Ricci. Elara Ricci. He tested the syllables, committing them to memory. You will not be going to your interview with the Morettis. You will come with me. Now. I will not, I said, finding a shard of defiance in the bedlam of my fear. You can't just kidnap me. Let me out of this car. It is not a request. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out his phone. With a single tap, he turned the screen to me. It was a photograph of a baby, maybe 4 months old, lying in a stark, medical-looking crib. The child was beautiful, with a thick shock of dark hair and long lashes, but his skin had a faint, unmistakable bluish tint, especially around his lips and tiny fingertips. Wires and monitors formed a delicate, cruel cage around him. This is my son, Leo. He has tetralogy of Fallot. His surgery is in 48 hours. The specialist from Boston arrives tomorrow. He has been declining. The nurses at the private clinic are competent, but not specialists. They do not understand the nuances. He is in pain. He is fading. His voice cracked on the last word, the sound so alien coming from this man of stone and shadow that it stole my breath. You understand it. I saw it in your notes. You have studied this. You have loved a child with this. He wasn't just asking for a nurse. He was begging for a lifeline. The terrifying authority was gone, replaced in an instant by a father staring into an abyss. I looked from his ravaged face to the photo of the fragile, blue-tinged baby. The ghost of Mia's smile in my photograph seemed to press against my heart. I had failed Mia in the most final way possible. I couldn't save her, but this baby and Leo, he was alive. He was fighting. And this man, for all his terrifying power, was utterly helpless. The car slowed, pulling up to a massive wrought iron gate set in a high stone wall. Security cameras swiveled silently toward us. This was his destination, his fortress. He leaned even closer, his words a low, fervent vow. Help me save him. Do this, and I will give you more than any nanny position ever could. I will erase your debts. I will give you safety. I will give you a purpose. Save my son, Ilara Ricci, and everything I have is yours to call upon. The gates began to swing open, revealing a manicured drive leading to a palatial, illuminated villa, a world away from the storm-drenched streets, from eviction notices, from grief with no outlet, a world of undeniable danger, of impossible stakes. But in the center of it was a sick baby, who needed the exact knowledge that was etched into my soul. Born from loving and losing Mia, I looked at the desperate father. I looked at the picture of baby Leo. My own bag, with its memories of failure, sat spilled at my feet. I took a deep, shuddering breath that felt like my first in 6 months. Take me to him, I said. The interior of the Villa Santoro was not what I expected. After the menace of the car and the imposing, gated walls, I'd braced for cold marble, ostentatious gold art that intimidated. Instead, I was led through a grand foyer into a space that felt like a high-tech medical command center had been softly absorbed by a warm, if severely elegant home. The walls were a soft taupe, the floors polished dark wood scattered with thick, muted rugs in shades of charcoal and cream. But discreet panels hummed with electronic equipment, and a uniformed man sat before, a bank of monitors showing every angle of the estate and the city beyond in silent, black and white vigilance. My guide, my captor, my employer? Santoro had not spoken another word since my acquiescence. He moved ahead of me with a silent, predatory grace, his driver, the mountain man Bruno, following behind me like a quiet, breathing shadow. There was no question of escape. The gates had closed with a final electronic sigh. I was in the lion's den, my only currency the knowledge in my head and the aching, bruised empathy in my heart. This way, Santoro said, the 2 words clipped, not looking back. He led me away from the main living areas, down a quieter corridor. The air changed subtly, the scent of cedar and lemon. Polish gave way to the sterile, antiseptic smell and the faint, sweet metallic note of medical equipment. My nurse's senses, dormant for months, flickered to life, cataloging the sounds, the soft whir of a pump, the steady, slow beep of a cardiac monitor, a sound that used to be my daily symphony, now a trigger that made my stomach clench. He stopped before a door, his broad shoulders blocking the view. For a moment he stood there, his head slightly bowed. I saw his hand, resting against the dark wood of the doorframe, tighten until his knuckles turned white. It was the most vulnerable thing I'd seen from him yet. This wasn't just a room. It was his battlefield, his temple, his heart housed in another fragile body. He pushed the door open. The room was a contradiction. One wall was a beautiful mural of a twilight forest, all deep blues and silvery trees. The others were lined with the cold, efficient hardware of intensive care. A state-of-the-art incubator, monitors with lines tracing their glowing paths, an oxygen concentrator, a rack of precisely organized medical supplies. And in the center of it all, in a crib that was both ornate and functional, lay Leo. He was smaller than he'd looked in the photograph. More fragile. The bluish tint to his skin was more pronounced in the soft light of the room. A dusky shadow under his eyes and around his perfect Cupid's bow lips. He was sleeping, but it wasn't restful. His tiny chest worked too hard, a rapid, shallow fluttering. Each breath seemed like a conscious effort. A nurse in crisp scrubs, a professional, competent-looking woman in her 40s, looked up from a chart, her expression carefully neutral until she saw Santoro. Then a flicker of what might have been pity crossed her face. "Don Santoro," she said softly. "How is he?" His voice was stripped bare, all pretense of control gone. It was just a father's raw fear. Stable, for now. His sats have dipped a few times this evening. We've increased the oxygen slightly. Dr. Cavalli will be here in the morning. Her eyes flicked to me, curious, assessing my soaked, disheveled appearance with professional detachment. Santoro didn't introduce me. He moved to the crib as if pulled by a magnet. He reached in, his large, mighty hand impossibly gentle as he brushed a fingertip over Leo's downy head. The contrast was breathtaking, the hand that undoubtedly commanded fear, capable of such exquisite tenderness. "Leo," he murmured, a sound so low I almost didn't hear it. "I brought help." He turned then, and his eyes found mine. In the clinical light of his son's room, he looked younger and older, all at once. The lines of stress were etched deep, but the cold, calculating mask was gone. "This is Alara Ricci. She is a pediatric cardiac nurse. She will be taking over Leo's primary care until after the surgery." The other nurse's eyebrows shot up. "I see. Shall I brief her on the current regimen?" "No." Santoro's gaze never left mine. It was a challenge, a test. "I want her fresh assessment. I want to know what she sees, what you might have missed." The nurse stiffened slightly, a flush of professional indignation on her cheeks, but she nodded. "Of course. The charts are here." She gestured stiffly to a tablet on a side table. "Leave us," Santoro said, the command returning to his voice, though it was softened by the room's gravity. With a final, uncertain glance at me, the nurse left, closing the door quietly behind her. The silence that followed was filled only with the beeping monitor and Leo's labored breathing. I was alone with a Mafia boss and his dying son. The absurdity of it was almost laughable. A week ago, I was eating canned soup alone in my sister's dark apartment. Now this. "Well?" Santoro said the single word was weighted with a world of hope and dread. I approached the crib slowly, my own heart hammering. This wasn't a textbook. This wasn't a memory. This was a living, struggling child. I slipped into the role like a second skin I'd tried to burn off. My hands, cold from the rain, I rubbed together before reaching out. I didn't touch him yet. I observed. The cyanosis, the slight flaring of his nostrils with each breath, the way his little ribs retracted. "May I?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He gave a tight single nod. My fingers went to Leo's tiny wrist, finding the thread-like pulse. Fast, too fast. I gently warmed my stethoscope, always in my bag, a habit I couldn't break, against my palm before listening to his heart. The whooshing murmur was pronounced, a turbulent river where there should be a calm stream. I checked his capillary refill and the color of his gums. I studied the monitor readings, the oxygen saturation numbers hovering at a precarious level. Santoro watched every move, a statue of coiled tension. "Tell me," he finally ground out when I stepped back. I took a deep breath, meeting his eyes. The professional in me took over, pushing the fear aside. "You're right. He's declining. He's in congestive heart failure. The medical regimen he's on is standard, but it's not aggressive enough for where he is right now. He needs diuretics to reduce the fluid load on his heart. His oxygen needs to be titrated more precisely. Too much can be as bad as too little for his specific physiology. And he's in pain. You can see it in the way he's holding his body, even in sleep. He needs better pain management, or he'll exhaust himself before he even gets to surgery." I saw the impact of each word, and it hit him like a physical blow. His jaw tightened. "The clinic said they were doing everything." They're doing the textbook protocol. But with TOF, especially pre-surgery, every child is different. It's about minute-to-minute adjustments. Nuance. I gestured to the monitors. This setup is incredible, but it's only as good as the person interpreting the data and acting on it. And you can do that? The question was naked, stripped of all his power. I looked at Leo's struggling form. I saw Mia. I saw every baby I'd ever fought for in the NICU. The part of me I thought had died with my sister stirred, stretched, and stood up. Yes, I said, and for the first time in months, I meant it without a shadow of a doubt. I can. He closed his eyes for a brief second, a flicker of relief so profound it seemed to weaken his knees. He steadied himself against the crib rail. Then do it. Whatever you need. Change anything. Order anything. I will have it here within the hour. I need to start now. The diuretic is a different analgesic. I'll need to recalibrate the oxygen mixer. I was already moving, my mind racing through dosages based on his weight, which I quickly verified from the chart. I spoke as I worked, my voice calm, directive. I'll need a specific IV pump for the medication. The one here is for nutrition. It won't deliver precisely enough. He already had his phone out. Bruno, get Dr. Cavalli on the line, now. Then I need you to go to the clinic pharmacy and get the following. He looked at me, waiting. I listed the medications and the specific pump model. He repeated them into the phone without a stumble, his voice absolute. He hung up. 20 minutes, he said. For the next 20 minutes I worked. I gently examined Leo more thoroughly, speaking to him in soft whispers. Hey, little lion. We're going to help you breathe easier, okay? His eyes, a deep, murky blue, fluttered open for a second. He didn't cry. He just looked at me, with a weariness no infant should ever know. It shattered me and put me back together all at once. Santoro didn't leave. He stood in the corner, a dark sentinel, watching my every move. I was intensely aware of his gaze, but it wasn't threatening now. It was desperate, hungry for every scrap of competence I could offer. When Bruno returned with a cool bag of supplies, Santoro brought it to me himself. Our fingers brushed during the handoff. His were ice cold. Show me, he said, not a command, but a plea. Show me what you're doing. So I did. I explained in quiet tones as I prepared the new IV line, programmed the sophisticated pump, and adjusted the oxygen concentrator based on the pulse ox reading and the subtle color of Leo's skin. See this number? We want it just a few points higher, but not too high, or it can affect his pulmonary circulation. It's a balance. He listened, his head bowed next to mine, absorbing every word like a man in the desert finding water. It took an hour. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Leo's breathing began to change. The frantic fluttering of his chest eased into a deeper, slower rhythm. The alarming beep of the oxygen saturation monitor steadied into a more consistent, stronger tone. The bluish pallor around his lips faded, just a shade, toward pink. I looked up from adjusting the blanket around him to find Santoro staring not at Leo, but at me. There were tears in his eyes. He made no move to hide them. In that moment, he wasn't Don Santoro. He was Leo's father, and I had just given him the first glimpse of hope he'd had in weeks. He's resting, I whispered. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He just nodded, unable to speak. Then he did something that shocked me more than anything else that night. He took my hand, the one that wasn't holding the stethoscope. His grip was firm, warm, and trembling slightly. He didn't say thank you. He just held my hand, his eyes locked on mine. And in that silent, charged connection, a debt was acknowledged that was deeper than any words. The door opened softly, and the older nurse stepped in, her eyes going immediately to the monitors. Her professional detachment faltered, her eyes widening. His SATs, his respiratory rate. Miss Ricci has made adjustments, Santoro said, his voice rough but firm. He released my hand, the absence of his grip feeling strangely abrupt. You will assist her. She is in charge of my son's care. Is that understood? The nurse, seeing the undeniable proof on the monitors, nodded. Yes, Don Santoro. He turned back to me. You will stay here in the room adjacent. Bruno will show you. You have everything you need? I looked at Leo, already looking more peaceful than before. I looked at the capable, if chastened, nurse. I thought of my empty apartment, my dead phone, the interview I'd missed. I had nowhere else to go. And more importantly, I had a purpose here. A child who needed me. Yes, I said, I have what I need. Bruno led me to the room adjacent to Leo's nursery. It wasn't a guest room. It was a caretaker's suite, designed for constant vigilance. A simple, elegant bed, a desk, a large bathroom, and a door that connected directly to the nursery currently stood ajar. Through it, I could hear the steady, improved beep of Leo's monitor. My satchel, looking pathetic and out of place, had been placed at the foot of the bed. Someone had even gathered my spilled belongings and roughly repacked them. The intercom, Bruno grunted, pointing a thick finger at a panel by the bed. You hear everything. Don Santoro expects you to be available through the night. Food will be brought. His tone wasn't unkind. It was just factual. He was a man who followed orders and expected others to do the same. He left, closing the main hall door behind him. I heard the distinct sound of a lock engaging, a soft electronic click. So I was still a prisoner, a valued prisoner, but a prisoner nonetheless. The adrenaline that had carried me through the car ride, the confrontation, the medical crisis, began to leach away, leaving me hollow and shaking. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my wet clothes clinging unpleasantly. I'd just medically intervened on a Mafia boss's heir. I'd ordered a man named Bruno to fetch drugs. I was locked in a villa that felt more like a fortress. The reality of it crashed down, a cold wave of surreal terror. But then, from the next room, Leo let out a soft, sighing sound. Not a cry of distress, but a sleepy murmur. The sound pulled me to my feet. My body moved on autopilot, the nurse in me overriding the frightened woman. I peeled off my soaked coat and sweater, leaving me in a damp t-shirt. I'd deal with it later. I pushed the connecting door fully open and stepped back into the nursery. The night nurse, Gianna, she'd introduced herself tersely, was checking the IV pump. She glanced at me, her earlier professional stiffness still present, but now mingled with a reluctant curiosity. Your adjustments were effective, she conceded. He was overloaded with fluid. His heart was drowning in it. I moved to the crib, my eyes automatically scanning the monitors. The numbers were holding steady in a better range. Leo's chest rose and fell with less dramatic effort. We need to monitor his electrolyte balance closely with the new diuretic. Every 4 hours. Gianna nodded, making a note. I have the schedule. I stood there, feeling suddenly superfluous. The immediate crisis was stabilized. Now there was just the watchful, agonizing wait for surgery. The quiet hum of the room pressed in on me. My gaze fell on the framed photograph on a shelf, a beautiful, laughing woman with dark, curling hair and Leo's eyes, holding a newborn. She was radiant. Santoro stood beside her, his arm around her, and in that picture he was smiling. A real, unguarded, sunlight-in-it smile. I'd never seen him smile. I couldn't imagine it. The man in the photo looked like a ghost of the one I'd met. His mother? I asked softly, though I knew the answer. Gianna followed my gaze, her expression softening. Chiara. She died 2 days after he was born. An embolism. There was nothing anyone could do. She said it with a quiet finality that spoke of having repeated it many times. 2 days. Leo had never known his mother. Santoro had lost his wife and gained a critically ill son in the same brutal breath. The pieces of his stark desperation snapped into a clearer, more painful picture. My own grief, a constant dull ache, recognized its cousin in his story. I'd lost my sister and my niece. He'd lost his wife and was watching his son slip away. We were both orbiting different stars in the same constellation of loss. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear splashed onto the rail of Leo's crib. I wiped it away hastily, but Gianna saw. You lost a child, she stated, not unkindly. My niece? She had tough as well. She didn't make it to surgery. The words were ashes in my mouth. Gianna was silent for a long moment. Then you understand the stakes better than anyone. Here. She didn't say she was sorry. It was better that way. Pity was a currency I couldn't spend anymore. Understanding was what I needed. I should try to sleep, I said, though the idea seemed ludicrous. I will wake you if there is any change. Any at all, Gianna promised, and this time there was no resentment in her voice. We were allied now, not by choice but by the tiny, fighting heart in the crib between us. Back in my room, I found a set of soft, gray linen pajamas and a thick robe laid out on the bed. No tags, just obscenely expensive fabric. There was food on the desk, too. A simple bowl of pasta pomodoro, a glass of water, a small carafe of wine. I ignored the wine. I changed out of my damp clothes, the soft fabric feeling alien against my skin. I ate the pasta without tasting it, my ear tuned to the gentle rhythm of the monitors next door. Sleep was a fractured thing. I drifted off only to jolt awake at imagined alarms, my heart pounding. Each time I'd slip into the nursery to check. Gianna would give me a silent thumbs up. Leo slept on, looking a little less blue each time. In the deepest part of the night, I woke not from a nightmare, but from the silence. The steady beep was gone. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. I was out of bed and through the connecting door in seconds. Santoro was there. He stood by the crib, his back to me, a monumental silhouette in the dim nightlight. He'd removed his suit jacket and tie. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing powerful forearms marked with faded, old scars and what looked like part of an intricate tattoo. He was holding Leo, not awkwardly, not like a man unaccustomed to babies, but with a practiced, natural ease that was utterly disarming. He was swaying gently, his head bent low, whispering something in Italian. A lullaby. His voice was a deep, gravelly murmur, so tender it made my throat ache. The monitor was silent because he'd disconnected, the lead from Leo's foot to hold him. The baby was awake, his dark eyes open, gazing up at his father's face. He wasn't crying. He was looking. One tiny hand had escaped the swaddle and was resting against Santoro's chest. Over his heart, I must have made a sound, a faint intake of breath, because Santoro went still. He didn't turn around. I could not sleep, he said, his voice low, still holding that melodic quality from the lullaby. I heard him stir. Sometimes the machines frighten him. The silence is better. I stepped further into the room, the floor cool under my bare feet. His color is good. His breathing is calm. Because of you. He finally turned his head, just slightly, his profile etched in the soft light. The harsh lines of his face were smoothed in the shadows, the vulnerability I'd glimpsed earlier now fully exposed. I have not held him like this without him crying from the struggle of it in weeks. The confession hung between us, intimate and heavy. I walked closer, not to check the monitors, but to see them. The mighty Don Santoro, cradling his fragile son. It was the most powerful and the most helpless thing I had ever witnessed. He knows your voice, I said softly. He knows nothing but pain and these walls, Santoro replied. But there was no bitterness, only a profound sadness. He looked down at Leo, his expression so devastatingly loving that it was hard to look at directly. I would trade every breath in my body for one easy breath in his. I knew that feeling. The desperate, bargaining anguish. I'd have traded my own life for Mia's in a heartbeat. To hear that same sentiment from this man, in this context, broke something open inside me. The last of my professional detachment crumbled. This wasn't just a clinical case. This was a family. He's stronger than you think, I heard myself say. He's a fighter. You can see it. Santoro's eyes met mine over Leo's head. How did you survive it? He asked abruptly. Losing your child? The question was a lance to a wound that would never fully close. But in this room, in this shared space of vigil, it didn't feel invasive. It felt like reaching across a dark chasm. I didn't, I answered honestly, my voice trembling. Not really. A part of me died with her. The rest of me just learned to breathe around the hole she left. You don't survive it. You learn to carry it. He absorbed that, his gaze returning to Leo. I cannot carry another loss, Alara. I will not survive it. Then we won't let it happen, I said, with a conviction that surprised me. We'll get him to surgery. We'll get him through it. He studied me for a long moment. You say we. You brought me here to help him. That makes it we. I didn't know where this boldness was coming from. Maybe from the midnight intimacy. Maybe from seeing the father beneath the dawn. A ghost of that smile from the photograph touched his lips, just a fleeting shadow. Yes, he murmured. It does. He shifted Leo gently, preparing to lay him back down. You should rest. Tomorrow the specialist arrives. It will be a long day. He reconnected the monitor lead with careful hands. The soft beep resumed, a reassuring metronome. As he straightened, he was close to me. I could smell the subtle scent of his soap, see the fatigue etched like fine cracks around his eyes. Thank you, he said, the words stark and straightforward. For tonight, for seeing him, not just the patient, but him. Before I could respond, he was gone, slipping out the main nursery door into the darkened hall, leaving me alone with the sleeping baby and the echo of his gratitude. I didn't go back to my bed. I pulled the armchair closer to the crib and sat, watching Leo sleep. We. The word echoed in the quiet room. I was trapped in a gilded cage, tangled with a dangerous man in a world I didn't understand, all for a baby I'd just met. But for the first time since Sophia and Mia were taken, the crushing weight of my grief felt shared, not lighter, but borne on more than one set of shoulders. And in that, there was a terrifying, fragile sliver of something that felt almost like hope. The specialist from Boston, Dr. Eris Thorne, arrived at dawn with the chill of the Atlantic still clinging to his expensive wool coat. He was a man of sharp angles and sharper intellect, his gaze missing nothing. Santoro, who had somehow transformed back into the impeccable, imposing Dawn in a fresh suit, met him in the foyer. I hovered in the background, feeling acutely the disparity between my borrowed linen clothes and the world of high-stakes medicine and power unfolding in the grand entrance. Santoro introduced me without ceremony. Dr. Thorne, this is Alara Ricci. She is overseeing Leo's preoperative care. She stabilized him last night. Dr. Thorne's assessing eyes swept over me, pausing on my hands, which were unconsciously curled as if still holding a stethoscope. Credentials? He asked, not unkindly, but with the blunt efficiency of a man who dealt in facts, not mysteries. Pediatric cardiac RN. I worked at the Ospedale dei Bambini for 5 years. My last case was a severe TOF infant. I kept my voice level. Though mentioning Mia's case as my last sent a familiar pang through me. He gave a short nod, seemingly satisfied by the specificity. Show me. The next hour was a grueling examination, not just of Leo, but of me. Dr. Thorne questioned every adjustment I'd made, scrutinized my charting, and ran his own diagnostics. Santoro stood like a statue by the window, a silent pressure in the room. I answered, explained, cited studies and protocols. My knowledge, hard-won from countless hours of research and the brutal, personal tutor of loss, held firm. Finally, Dr. Thorne straightened, peeling off his gloves. He looked from the now sleeping Leo, who had weathered the prodding with remarkable calm, his numbers holding steady, to me, and then to Santoro. She's right, he said, the 2 words triggering a visible release of tension in Santoro's shoulders, which I hadn't even fully registered was there. The previous regimen was inadequate. The fluid overload was significant. Her interventions were precise and correct. He is in a markedly better state for surgery tomorrow than he was 24 hours ago. He turned his full attention to me. You have excellent instincts, Miss Ricci. You've bought him a crucial margin. The professional validation was a balm I didn't know I needed. But it was Santoro's reaction that struck me. He didn't smile. He closed his eyes for a brief second, a silent prayer of thanks. When he opened them, they found mine. There was no mistaking the look there. It was more than gratitude. It was a recognition of worth. I had passed a test he hadn't fully articulated. The surgery will proceed at 7 a.m., Dr. Thorne continued, pulling us into planning. I want Miss Ricci present for the final prep, and in the recovery ICU, her familiarity with his baseline is an asset. She will be there, Santoro stated, his voice leaving no room for contradiction, as if I might have dreamed of being anywhere else. The day became a blur of controlled preparation. I worked alongside Gianna and Dr. Thorne in a focused clinical unit, Santoro was a constant, quiet presence, observing, asking brief, pointed questions, but mostly just watching his son. The terrifying Dawn was gone again, submerged beneath the anxious father. In a late afternoon lull, as I was programming infusion rates for the night, Bruno appeared at the nursery door. "Don Santoro wishes to see you in his study, Miss Ricci." A flicker of unease returned. The study sounded like the domain of the other Santoro, the one from the car. Gianna gave me an encouraging, if slightly wary, nod. Bruno led me to a different wing of the villa, to a room that finally matched my original expectations. It was a library study, all dark wood and leather, with the scent of old paper and fine whiskey. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves held volumes in Italian, English, and what looked like Latin. A massive desk dominated the room, its surface pristine except for a single file folder. Santoro stood by a window, looking out over the now sunlit grounds. He'd discarded his suit jacket again. The tattoos on his forearm were more visible. A crowned lion, intricate scrollwork, what looked like a stylized family crest. "You wish to see me?" I said, my voice smaller than I intended in the imposing space. He turned. The anxiety from the nursery was banked, replaced by a cool, assessing calm. He gestured to one of the leather armchairs. "Sit, please." I sat, perched on the edge. He didn't take the chair behind the desk. Instead, he leaned against the front of it, crossing his arms, effectively blocking my easy exit without seeming to. "Dr. Thorne is satisfied with your work." "More than satisfied," he began. "Leo is the priority. I'm glad I could help. You did more than help. You reversed a decline." He paused, his dark eyes pinning me. "Last night, I made you a promise. Debt, safety, purpose." He reached behind him and picked up the folder from the desk. He didn't open it. He just held it. "My people are thorough. Alara, your debts, the back rent on your sister's apartment, the outstanding utilities. The credit card balances have been cleared." My mouth went dry. You paid them?" "I eliminated them. They no longer exist." He said it as if he'd taken out the trash. "The eviction notice has been rescinded. The apartment is yours if you want it. Though," he added, his gaze sweeping over me, "I expect you will not be returning there immediately." It was too much. The speed, the absolute lack of agency. "I didn't ask for that. You asked for a job. I am providing compensation. This is a down payment." He finally opened the folder. "Your sister, Sophia Ricci, age 28, died in a collision with a commercial truck on the A4, 6 months and 12 days ago. Her daughter Mia, age 11 months, died 3 weeks later due to complications from tetralogy of Fallot." He recited the facts without inflection, but his eyes watched my face, seeing each flinch. "You were her sole guardian after Sophia's death. You left your position at the hospital to care for Mia full-time. After her passing, you disengaged. You had me investigated." The heat of violation rose in my cheeks. "I do not allow strangers near my son without knowing who they are. You are a woman shaped by profound loss. You are also a highly skilled nurse who acted with decisive courage when faced with my son's need. This," he tapped the file, "tells me why you understand the stakes. It does not define your capability." He set the file down and moved to stand before my chair, forcing me to look up at him. "The purpose I offered, does caring for Leo provide that?" It did. God help me, it did. In the hellscape of my grief, Leo was a tiny breathing focal point, a chance to use my pain for something other than self-destruction. I nodded, unable to lie. "Good." A flicker of something like satisfaction in his eyes. "The safety, that is more complex. The Moretti family you were to interview is not simply wealthy. They are a rival, Casca, my rival. Your association with me, however brief, has already been noted. If you were to walk out of my gates now, you would be a target. A curiosity at best, a potential lever against me at worst." The cold reality of his world seeped into the warm room. "So my safety is only guaranteed if I stay here." "Your safety is guaranteed because you are here," he corrected. "Under my protection. This is not a manipulation, Ilara. It is a fact of the world I exist in. You stepped into it the moment you entered my car. I have a responsibility for that." "And after?" I whispered. "After Leo's surgery? When he's recovered?" He was silent for a long moment. "That is a discussion for after. For now, your focus is on Leo. My focus is ensuring you have everything you require to do your job, and that you are protected while you do it." He straightened. "You are not a prisoner, but you are under guard. For your safety and my son's. Do you understand the distinction? A prisoner had no choice. Under guard implied a threat existed outside. I understood it perfectly. It was a gilded cage with a reason. I understand. Is there anything you need, personally? I thought of my meager belongings, my dead phone, my phone charger, some clothes that are mine. He nodded. Bruno will take you this evening, with an escort, to retrieve what you need from your apartment. He said it like a concession, a test of trust, letting me see my old life, under guard, to choose to return to this new, terrifying one. Thank you, I said and meant it. He studied me for another moment, the intensity in his gaze softening just a fraction. You called him a fighter last night. You were right. But fighters need good generals. You are his general, Ilara. Lead him through this battle tomorrow. The weight of the metaphor, of the trust he was placing in me, was staggering. He wasn't just asking me to monitor vitals. He was asking me to help lead his son to war. I met his gaze, the fear in my own heart melting into a solid nurse's resolve. I will. The trip to my apartment was surreal. Bruno drove, with another unsmiling man in the passenger seat. A second car followed us. My tiny, sun-bleached apartment building looked like a doll's house compared to the villa. Inside, the silence was deafening, a different silence from Leo's nursery. This was the silence of absence, of ended things. I moved quickly, throwing clothes, a few books, Mia's favorite stuffed rabbit, my charger, and my proper nursing clogs into a duffel bag. I didn't look at Sophia's room. I couldn't. As I zipped the bag, I saw the eviction notice on the counter. It was, as Santoro had said, now stamped rescinded in angry red ink. The sight of it didn't bring relief. It got a final, severe snap. This chapter was closed by a Mafia boss's hand. When we returned to the villa, night had fallen. Leo's pre-surgical prep had begun. A special bath, final checks. The atmosphere was tense, focused. Santoro was in the nursery, dressed in dark slacks and a black sweater, looking more like a shadow than a man. He watched as I settled back into the rhythm of care. Later, as I performed a final set of observations, he spoke from his corner. You went back. You came back. I didn't look up from the pulse oximeter. I said I would. Many people say things. He paused. You brought a toy rabbit. My hand stilled. I'd left the rabbit in my duffel, not wanting to explain. It was my niece's. It comforted her. He didn't reply. But when I finally glanced his way, he was looking not at me, but at Leo, with an expression of such fierce, painful love that it stole my breath. In that moment, I knew I hadn't just come back for the safety, or the cleared debts, or even the purpose. I'd come back for them. For the broken, beautiful tragedy of this father and son, which had somehow begun to weave itself around the shattered pieces of me. The night before surgery was long and quiet. Santoro never left. We kept our vigil together, two sentinels in the dim light, waiting for the dawn and the battle it would bring. The morning of the surgery arrived not with a sunrise, but with a slow, gray leashing of darkness. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Leo was prepped with a quiet efficiency that belied the monumental nature of what was to come. I bathed him with the special antiseptic wash, my hands gentle but clinical. He was fussy, sensing the disruption in his tiny universe. Santoro stood by, his face a mask of carved stone, but his eyes tracked every move, every wire, every piece of tape. Dr. Thorne arrived, accompanied by a pared-down surgical team he'd brought with him. The atmosphere shifted from vigil to mission. It was time. As they began to transfer Leo to the specialized transport incubator for the short journey to the private surgical suite within the villa, a fact that still stunned me, Santoro finally broke his silence. He stepped forward, placing a large, steadying hand on the incubator's edge. He leaned down, his face close to the porthole. Be brave, mio leoncino, he murmured, his voice thick. Fight. Your father is waiting for you." He pressed his lips against the plastic, a kiss through a barrier. Then he straightened, his expression shutting down completely, the vulnerability sealed away behind the impenetrable facade of Don Santoro. He gave Dr. Thorne a single, sharp nod. They wheeled him away, the soft whir of the equipment fading down the hall. The silence they left behind was absolute and suffocating. Santoro didn't move. He stared at the empty space where the crib had been. I busied myself straightening the already immaculate room, my hands needing a task. The minutes stretched, each one an eternity. "He will be in pre-op for an hour," I said, to break the silence. "Then the surgery itself will take 4 to 6 hours, depending on what Dr. Thorne finds. After that, recovery in the ICU here." "I am aware of the timeline," he said, his voice flat. He finally turned from the empty spot. His gaze swept over me, taking in my scrubs, my nervous hands. "You should eat." "I'm not hungry." "Neither am I, but we will need our strength. Come." It wasn't an invitation. It was an order from a man accustomed to giving orders. I followed him out of the nursery, not to the grand dining room, but to a small, sunlit breakfast nook overlooking a walled garden. A simple spread of coffee, pastries, and fruit was laid out. He poured 2 cups of black coffee and pushed one toward me before sitting. He didn't touch the food. He just cradled the porcelain cup in his hands, staring into the dark liquid as if it held answers. The domesticity of the scene was almost more jarring than the medical drama. Sitting across from a Mafia boss at a sun-drenched table, waiting for his son's heart to be cut open and repaired. The absurdity was dizzying. "Tell me about her," he said suddenly without looking up. "Who?" "Your niece, Mia." The name in his mouth was a shock. It felt too intimate, a piece of my shattered soul he had no right to. Yet, in the vacuum of this waiting hell, maybe he did. "What do you want to know?" "What was she like?" When she smiled. The specificity of the question undid me. It wasn't about the illness. It was about life. I took a shaky breath. She had this laugh. It was like tiny bells. She'd laugh when I made silly faces or when the sun made patterns on the wall. She loved the rabbit. She'd gum its ear while she fell asleep. The words spilled out, painful and precious. She was fierce even then. Hated her medication. Would clamp her little mouth shut like a vice. We had to get creative. A tear escaped, tracing a hot path down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. He listened, his eyes still on his coffee. "Leo has his mother's frown, when he's concentrating, or when he's angry, which is often." A faint, almost invisible smile touched his lips and was gone. Chiara had a temper like a summer storm. Fast, fierce, and then it was over, and the sun would come out. He fell silent, the memory hovering between us. "I miss the sun," he said so quietly I almost didn't hear it. The confession hung in the air, fragile as a soap bubble. The mighty Don Santoro, admitting he was living in perpetual shadow. We sat in that shared space of missing, 2 strangers bound by loss and a tiny, fighting heart in an operating room down the hall. Hours passed. Bruno came in periodically with updates that were no updates at all. "Surgery has begun. Dr. Thorne reports no unexpected complications thus far," Santoro acknowledged, each with a grim nod. He never left the nook. He paced sometimes, a caged panther, but always returned to his seat. During one of these pauses, he looked at me. "Why did you leave the hospital after?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for months. I couldn't separate it. Every baby in the NICU was Mia. Every monitor beep was her monitor. Every worried parent was me. I just broke. He nodded slowly, as if he understood completely. "I have not been able to enter the city's opera house since Chiara died. We met there. It was her favorite place." He said it simply, a fact. Some breaks do not heal. They become part of the landscape you navigate. It was the truest thing anyone had said to me since it happened. A different kind of tension began to coil in the room as the projected end of the surgery drew near. Santoro became absolutely still, his focus turned inward, as if he could somehow feel the progress of the scalpel through the bond of blood. Finally, after an eternity that had lasted exactly 5 hours and 47 minutes, Dr. Thorne appeared in the doorway. He still wore his surgical cap, his mask pulled down around his neck. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear. Santoro was on his feet in an instant. He didn't speak. He just waited, a man facing his execution or his pardon. It went as well as it possibly could, Dr. Thorne said, and the air rushed back into the room. The repair is complete. His anatomy presented some challenges, but they were surmountable. He's off bypass. His heart is beating on its own. Strongly. Santoro swayed. I thought for a second he might fall. He braced a hand on the table, his head bowing. A ragged, shuddering breath escaped him. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. He is alive. He is. He's critical, but stable. We're transferring him to the ICU now. The next 24 hours are crucial. Dr. Thorne's gaze shifted to me. Miss Ricci, I'd like you there. Your familiarity is key. I was already moving. Of course. Santoro fell into step beside me as we followed Dr. Thorne to the villa's immaculate hospital-grade ICU. Seeing Leo in the post-op bay was a shock. He seemed smaller, lost in a tangle of new, more invasive lines. Chest tubes, arterial lines, a ventilator tube taped neatly at his mouth. His chest was bandaged. But the color, the dusky blue, was gone. His skin was pale, yes, but underneath was a faint, undeniable flush of pink. The oxygen saturation monitor read a beautiful, steady 98%. My professional brain clicked into overdrive, assessing, noting ventilator settings, medication drips, and drainage from the chest tubes. But my heart saw a miracle. A tiny, battered miracle. Santoro stopped at the foot of the bed, his hand going to the rail. He didn't try to touch Leo, not with the forest of wires. He just stared, drinking in the sight of his son's pink toes, his peacefully resting face. The tears he'd held back finally fell, silent and unchecked. He made no move to hide them. Dr. Thorne gave quiet instructions to the intensivist nurse he'd brought, then turned to us. He's sedated and will be for a while. The pain is managed. Now, we watch and wait. The vigil began anew, but the tenor was different. The desperate, free-falling fear was replaced by a grueling, watchful anxiety. Every blip on the monitor, every drop of fluid in the collection chambers, mattered. Santoro refused to leave. A chair was brought for him. He sat, a statue of paternal vigilance, his eyes rarely leaving Leo's small form. I worked in seamless tandem with Dr. Thorne's nurse, my hands remembering their old skill. I adjusted drips based on blood pressure readings. I suctioned the breathing tube with meticulous care, and I monitored the chest tube output for signs of bleeding. I was in my element, and for the first time in so long, the element didn't feel like it was drowning me. As night fell again, Santoro finally spoke, his voice hoarse from disuse. You are good at this. I was checking the ventilator connections. It's my job. It is more than a job. It is a calling. You have a gift. You should not have left it. The statement coming from him held a strange weight. I had to. And now? He looked at me, his face shadowed in the dim ICU light. Now that you are back in it? Does it still feel like drowning? I looked at Leo, his chest rising and falling with the steady, mechanical rhythm of the ventilator. I thought of Mia. The pain was there, a familiar companion, but it wasn't choking me. It was channeled. No, I said, surprised by my own answer. It feels like I'm using the wreckage to build a bridge. For him. He held my gaze for a long moment, something unreadable shifting in his eyes. Then he nodded and turned his attention back to his son. In the small hours of the morning, Leo's blood pressure dipped. It was a known, common post-op issue, but it sent a jolt of adrenaline through the room. The intensivist nurse moved to adjust medication. I was already cross-checking his fluid balance, my mind racing. Hold the diuretic for 1 cycle, I suggested. He might be a little dry from the OR. Give a small fluid bolus first. The nurse glanced at Dr. Thorne, who had been catnapping in a corner. He gave a tired nod of agreement. We made the adjustment. Slowly, steadily, Leo's blood pressure crept back to an acceptable range. Santoro had watched it all, his body tense. When the crisis passed, he let out a slow breath. His eyes found mine across the bed. I wanted to let you know that no words were needed. The shared victory, however small, was another thread tying me to this room, to this child, to this man. By the next dawn, Leo was stable enough to begin the slow, careful process of weaning from the ventilator. It was a delicate dance, and I took the lead under Dr. Thorne's supervision. Santoro watched, learning, asking quiet questions about each step. When, finally, the breathing tube was removed and Leo took his first raspy, independent breath, a clear, strong cry that, while weak, was the sound of life fighting its way back, Santoro broke. He stood, turning away from the bed, his shoulders shaking. I thought he was overcome, which he was. But when he turned back, his face was not just etched with relief, but with a ferocious, blazing certainty. His eyes, red-rimmed and exhausted, locked onto me with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. "You," he said, the word a vow in the quiet room. "You did this." "Dr. Thorne did the surgery," I whispered, overwhelmed. "He repaired the heart. You saved the child. You brought him to the surgery in good condition. You guided him through the night." "That cry," he said, gesturing to Leo, who was now being settled by the nurse, "is your victory as much as anyone's." He walked around the bed until he stood before me. He was close, too close. The energy coming off him was electric, filled with the raw, unfiltered emotion of the last 48 hours. "My debt to you, Ilara Ricci, is now immeasurable." Before I could react, before I could say it was my job, that any nurse would have done the same, he did something that stopped the world. He took my face in his hands, his touch firm yet astonishingly gentle, and he kissed my forehead. Not a romantic kiss, a sacred one, a benediction, a seal. "You are under my protection," he murmured against my skin, his breath warm. "Now and always. This is no longer a transaction. This is a blood oath. My family is your family. My enemies are your enemies. My home is your home. Do you understand?" I understood nothing except the pounding of my own heart and the terrifying, thrilling sense that my life had just been irrevocably claimed. I looked up into his dark, solemn eyes and saw no room for argument. I saw only the terrifying, absolute truth of his world. All I could do was nod. The week that followed was a slow, meticulous ascent from the precipice. Leo improved, day by grueling day, hour by cautious hour. The ICU became our world, a sterile, beeping universe where progress was measured in milliliters of fluid, points of oxygen saturation, and the gradual weaning of powerful drugs. Santoro was a constant, splitting his time between the quiet intensity of the ICU and the muted roar of his business, which seemed to conduct itself via hushed phone calls and the occasional appearance of grim-faced men in the hallway. The dawn was back, but a different dawn. The cold, calculating edge was tempered by a profound, palpable relief. He looked at his son, now sleeping peacefully without the blue shadow of hypoxia, with an almost religious wonder. My role evolved. Dr. Thorne departed after 3 days, satisfied with Leo's trajectory, leaving me in de facto charge of his post-operative, nursing care under the remote, supervision of his intensivist nurse who stayed on. I was no longer just the crisis intervention. I was the architect of his recovery plan. I managed his pain, his nutrition, and his physical therapy. I taught Santoro how to safely hold him around the wires and how to read the monitors to distinguish actual distress from normal infant fussing. We fell into a strange domestic rhythm within the clinical setting. One afternoon, as I was gently exercising Leo's tiny limbs to prevent stiffness, Santoro watched from his chair. "You are patient with him," he observed. "He's been through a war. His body needs to remember how to just be," I said, carefully flexing a miniature foot. "And you? Have you remembered how to just be?" The question was softly spoken, but it felt invasive. I focused on Leo's foot. "I'm working." "That is not an answer." He stood and came to stand beside me, looking down at his son. "You have not asked about leaving, about your life outside." "There isn't much of one," I admitted, the truth stark. and Leo needs consistent care. It's easier if I'm here. Easier, he repeated, as if tasting the word. Is that all? I didn't know how to answer. Easier than facing my empty apartment. Easier than explaining where I'd been. Easier than being alone with my grief again. Here, the grief had a counterpart. Here, it was useful. It's where I'm needed, I finally said, which was the truest thing. He was silent for a moment. You are needed, he agreed. But the way he said it felt weighted, like it meant more than just nursing. The following evening, after Leo was settled for the night, Santoro didn't retreat to his study. Instead, he said, "Come, there is something you should see." He led me not to another clinical room or his office, but through a different wing of the villa to a set of French doors. He pushed them open onto an expansive stone terrace. Below us, Milan glittered like a bed of stolen jewels, the Duomo illuminated in the distance. The air was cool and clean, a world away from the filtered, antiseptic atmosphere of the ICU. "Breathe," he commanded softly. I did. The vastness of the view, the normality of a city going about its night, was dizzying. I'd been in the foxhole for so long I'd forgotten the sky existed. "I come here when the walls feel like they are closing in," he said, leaning on the stone balustrade. "When the decisions I must make weigh too heavily." He glanced at me. "You have been in a different kind of foxhole, but a foxhole nonetheless." "It's different now. He's getting better. It's a good time." "A good tired," he mused. "Yes. I remember that feeling after a hard-won victory. When Chiara was alive, we would come here. She would drink wine and talk about redesigning the gardens. I would listen and just be." The ghost of that smile touched his lips again. I have not been just being in a long time. The intimacy of the confession under the vast sky felt dangerous and necessary. What happened to her? To the driver of the truck? His profile hardened. It was not an accident. It was a message from the Moretti family, a poorly executed one, meant to intimidate a shipment route negotiation. The driver was a pawn. He is no longer a concern. The man who gave the order, Vittorio Moretti's eldest son, met with an unfortunate end 6 weeks later. He said it with a chilling matter-of-factness. An eye for an eye. A son for a wife. The casual brutality of it stole my breath. This was the world I was in. Not just the medical drama, but the raw, vengeful undercurrent. He had murdered a man for his wife. And he'd told me without preamble. "You're telling me this, why?" My voice was a whisper. He turned to face me, his eyes gleaming in the ambient light. "Because you are under my protection. Because you should know what that means. The Morettis are not just business rivals. They are the reason my son grew in his mother's womb, knowing her laughter, and was born into a world knowing only her absence. They are the reason I am a widower. They know you are here. They know what you have done for Leo. That makes you a symbol, a vulnerability and a strength." The weight of it settled on me, colder than the night air. "I'm a nurse. You are the woman who saved the Santoro heir. In my world, that makes you a legend, and it makes you a target." He stepped closer. "I will not let what happened to Chiara happen to you. But you must understand the landscape. You must trust that when I tell you not to leave the grounds, it is not to imprison you, but to armor you." I feel like a piece in a game I don't know how to play, I confessed, wrapping my arms around myself. "You are not a piece," he said, his voice dropping, becoming almost gentle. "You are the unexpected move that changes the entire board." He reached out, as if to touch my arm, then stopped, his hand hovering in the space between us before falling back to his side. "Come inside. It's cold." 2 days later, Leo was moved from the ICU to a regular room, a bright, sunny nursery adjacent to mine, still well-equipped, but without the terrifying array of intensive care machinery. It felt like a promotion, a celebration. Gianna and I laughed as we set up a mobile of stars and planets over his crib. That night, Santoro appeared at the door of the nursery as I was giving Leo his final bottle. He held a small velvet box. "A milestone," he said, his gaze on Leo, who was sucking contentedly. "He is out of danger. He still needs careful monitoring for a long time," I cautioned, ever the nurse. "I know, but the war is won. The rest is occupation." He held out the box. "For you." I stared at it, the bottle frozen halfway to Leo's mouth. "What is it?" "Open it." Setting the bottle down, I took the box. It was heavy. I lifted the lid. Nestled on black velvet was not jewelry, but a key. A heavy, old-fashioned iron key, intricately wrought. Next to it lay a sleek black phone. "The key is to the villa. All doors. It is a sign of trust. You come and go as you please, though I strongly advise you not to go alone, for the reasons we discussed. The phone is secure. My number, Bruno's, Gianna's, and the direct line to Leo's pediatrician are programmed in. Use it for anything. Always." I touched the cold iron of the key. It was more than an object. It was an unlocking, a citizenship in this gilded, dangerous world. "Thank you," I managed, my throat tight. "Do not thank me. I am still in your debt. This is a down payment on my sanity. Knowing you are not feeling like a prisoner makes you a better caregiver for my son." He gave me a look that was almost teasing, if the word could ever be applied to him. "And it is good for my conscience." He stayed while I finished feeding Leo, the simple domesticity of it now layered with the new reality the key in my pocket represented. After I put Leo down, Santoro lingered by the crib. "Will you join me for dinner tomorrow evening? In the dining room. Not a meal on a tray, a proper dinner. To commemorate." It sounded like a date. It couldn't be a date. This was Don Santoro. This was my employer, the father of my patient. But the word commemorate held a gravity that felt significant. He was marking a transition. For Leo. For us. "Yes," I heard myself say. "I'd like that." The day of the dinner, a nervous energy hummed under my skin. I spent extra time with Leo, as if his peaceful gurgles could calm me. Gianna, with a knowing glint in her eye, insisted I finish early. "Go, get ready. He's fine." Back in my room, I faced a crisis. I had nothing to wear. My duffel bag held jeans, t-shirts, and scrubs. I was contemplating the least wrinkled blouse when a soft knock came at the door. It was Teresa, the severe house manager I'd only glimpsed before. "Don Santoro thought you might appreciate a choice," she said without preamble, and wheeled in a clothing rack. On it hung 3 dresses. Simple, elegant, breathtakingly expensive looking. A sheath of emerald green silk, a black cocktail dress with subtle crystal detailing on the shoulders, a wine-colored wrap dress in soft cashmere. All my size. "I can't accept these," I stammered. "You can and you will," Teresa said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "He does not make gestures lightly. It would be an insult to refuse." Her stern expression softened a fraction. "The green one. It will complement your eyes. And it does not try too hard. That is important." An hour later, standing before the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The emerald silk fell in a perfect liquid line. It was modest but undeniably beautiful. I'd washed my hair and applied a little makeup for the first time in months. The woman in the reflection had shadows under her eyes, but she also had a light in them I thought had been extinguished forever. When I entered the formal dining room, Santoro was waiting by the window, a crystal glass of amber liquid in his hand. He turned, and his reaction was not what I expected. He didn't smile. He went utterly still. His eyes traveled from the sweep of my hair to the dress and back to my face, and in them was a look of such stark, arrested intensity that it felt like the air had been sucked from the room. It wasn't an appraisal. It was a revelation. "Ilara," he said, my name a low vibration. "You look—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The look said everything. He was seeing me, not the nurse, not the desperate woman in the rain, me, and it was terrifying. He recovered, offering his arm. "Shall we?" Dinner was an exquisite, surreal affair. The table was set for 2, lit by candles. The food was served, and then we were left entirely alone. He asked me questions. About my childhood. My training? My favorite book. My thoughts on a painting that hung in the hall. He listened with a focus that was flattering and unnerving. He He spoke of his own youth in Sicily, of coming to America as a teenager, of building something from nothing. Though he carefully glossed over the nature of that something, he spoke of Chiara with a fond, painful honesty. He talked about his hopes for Leo, a future far from the shadows. It was the most normal, and yet most abnormal evening of my life. He was charming, intelligent, and witty in a dry, sharp way. The dawn was present in his bearing, in the easy authority, but the man, Lorenzo, as he asked me to call him that night, was front and center. Over dessert, a delicate tiramisu, the conversation turned serious again. "The Morettis are making noises," he said, his earlier ease hardening. "They are not pleased with Leo's recovery. A weak heir is one thing, a strong one with a potent new symbol of resilience at his side is another. Me," the tiramisu turned to ash in my mouth. "You. They are calling you l'angelo custodi, the guardian angel. It rankles them. Vittorio Moretti is old, bitter, and his line is weak. He sees strength here, and it eats at him." Lorenzo's eyes held mine. "I am increasing security, for you especially. Bruno will be your shadow if you wish to leave the villa. I need you to be vigilant." "I understand. I hope you do." He set his fork down. "Because I need you to understand something else, Ilara. This is no longer a temporary assignment for me. You are not an employee. You are part of this household, part of my son's life, part of my strategic calculus. I cannot, and I will not allow anything to happen to you. Not just for Leo's sake, for mine." The candlelight flickered in his dark eyes. The unspoken words hung between us, thick and charged. For mine, not as a boss, not as a client, as a man. He stood, coming around the table. He offered his hand. When I took it, he didn't lead me from the room. He held it, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "I have lived in winter since Chiara died. You feel like the first day of spring. A dangerous, unpredictable spring, but spring nonetheless." He lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to my fingers. It was not the ICU's blessing. This was different. This was a claim, a promise, a beginning. "I will walk you to your room," he said, his voice rough. We walked in silence through the quiet villa. At my door, he stopped. He cupped my face again, as he had in the ICU, but this time his gaze dropped to my lips. The tension was a live wire. I knew he was going to kiss me. I knew I should turn away. This was insanity. This was a path with no safe end. But when his lips finally met mine, soft and questioning at first, then with a gathering intensity that spoke of months of pent-up fear and longing, I didn't pull away. I kissed him back. The world, the danger, the grief, the impossible situation, narrowed to the feel of his mouth on mine, the solid warmth of his chest under my hands, the shocking rightness of it amidst all the wrongness. When we broke apart, we were both breathless. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. "This is a complication I did not foresee," he murmured, a hint of wry amusement in his voice. "A bad one?" I whispered. He opened his eyes, and the look in them was fierce, possessive, and terrifyingly tender. "The most dangerous kind, the kind worth burning for." He kissed me once more, softly on the corner of my mouth. "Sleep, Ilara. Tomorrow the world will look different." He left me standing there, my fingers pressed to my lips, the taste of him and tiramisu and impending chaos on my tongue. The key in my pocket felt suddenly heavier. It hadn't just unlocked the villa. It had unlocked something in him. And something in me I thought was buried forever. The world did look different. It was sharper, brighter, and fraught with a new kind of tension. A delicious, terrifying current that hummed beneath every interaction. Lorenzo, I could no longer think of him as just... Santoro did not mention the kiss the next day, but it was there in the space between us, in the way his gaze lingered on me a moment too long when I entered a room, in the brush of his hand against my lower back as he passed me in the hall. It was a secret we held in the quiet of the villa, a fragile, explosive thing. My focus remained on Leo. His recovery was nothing short of remarkable. The pink in his cheeks was now permanent. His cries were strong and indignant rather than weak and winded, and he was beginning to hit developmental milestones he'd been too frail to attempt before. Every coup, every attempt to lift his head was a victory I felt in my soul. I was falling in love with him, not as a nurse with a patient, but as a woman with a child who had carved a space for himself in the wreckage of my heart. One sunny afternoon, I was giving Leo a bath in the nursery's sink, his little limbs splashing happily. Lorenzo leaned in the doorway, watching, a soft expression on his face that I was beginning to recognize as his Leo look. "He likes the water," he observed. "Most babies do. It's familiar." I gently poured water over his back. "He's going to be a strong swimmer. I will have the pool house renovated. He can learn next summer." He said it with such casual certainty, a future planned with me in it to witness. He pushed off the door frame and came to stand beside me. So close I could feel the heat of him. He didn't touch me, but his presence was physical. "You are good for him." "He's good for me," I answered honestly, toweling Leo off and lifting his wriggling, sweet-smelling body into my arms. Lorenzo's eyes met mine over Leo's head. "And what is good for you, Alara?" His voice was low, intimate. Before I could formulate an answer, what was good for me? This? Him? This impossible, beautiful trap? Bruno appeared at the door, his expression grim. "Don Santoro, a word." The softness vanished from Lorenzo's face, replaced by the cool, impenetrable mask of the dawn. He gave me a brief nod and followed Bruno out. The peace of the afternoon was shattered. I dressed Leo and put him down for his nap, my ears straining for any sound from the hall. When Lorenzo returned 20 minutes later, the air around him was cold with fury. "What is it?" I asked, my stomach tight. "The Morettis. They made a move. One of my import warehouses is on the docks. A fire. Contained but a message. His jaw was a hard line. And they left a note. Addressed to l'Angelo Custode." I slid down my spine. What did it say? He didn't answer directly. He crossed the room in 2 strides and took my shoulders, his grip firm. "You will not leave the villa. Not for any reason. Not with Bruno. Not with me. Do you understand? This is no longer posturing. This is an opening salvo. Because of me. Because of what you represent. Strength. Resilience. A future for my family that they are determined to snuff out." His thumb stroked my arms, a gesture at odds with the anger in his voice. "I will handle this. But you must promise me you will be careful, that you will follow security protocols without question." "I promise," I whispered, the reality of the danger finally crystal clear. It wasn't abstract anymore. It was a fire on a dock and a note with my new, unwanted title. The next 48 hours were a study in controlled siege. Security around the villa doubled. Men with hard eyes and discreet bulges under their jackets patrolled the gardens. The atmosphere was tense, waiting. Lorenzo was rarely home, and when he was buried in his study or on calls, his voice a low, dangerous rumble through the walls. I kept to the nursery wing with Leo, the outside world feeling like a hostile country. On the 3rd night, the attack came, not at the perimeter, but from within. I was asleep when the first explosion rocked the villa. Not a distant warehouse this time, a deep, concussive whump that shuddered the foundations. I was out of bed before my eyes were open, instinct propelling me to Leo's room. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness punctuated by the red glow of emergency battery lights. Alarm shrieked somewhere deep in the house. Leo was screaming, terrified by the noise and the sudden dark. I snatched him from his crib, clutching him to my chest. My heart was a wild drum against his. The door burst open. Gianna stood there, a flashlight in one hand, her face pale but determined. "We have to go to the safe room now." We fled down the back service stairs, Gianna leading with the flashlight. I could hear shouts, the sound of running feet, and then, unmistakably, the popping cracks of gunfire, inside the villa. My blood ran cold. I held Leo tighter, his cries muffled against my shoulder. The safe room was in the sub-basement, behind a hidden door in the wine cellar. As we reached the cellar door, a figure materialized from the shadows. Bruno. He had a cut over his eye, blood trickling down his temple. "Go. I'll hold here." "Where is Lorenzo?" I cried. "Handling it, go." Gianna yanked open the heavy door and pushed me inside a small, reinforced concrete room stocked with supplies, a crib, and communications equipment. She slammed the door behind us, engaging multiple heavy bolts. The sounds of the battle became muffled, distant booms and thuds. Leo was hysterical. I rocked him, shushing him, my own body trembling so violently I could barely stand. Gianna tried the comms unit. "Don Santoro? Base, come in." Static. She swore softly in Italian. Time lost meaning. It was measured in Leo's ragged breaths and the occasional dull thud from above. I was paralyzed with fear. Not for myself, but for Lorenzo. The image of him lying bleeding in one of those elegant hallways was a knife twisting in my gut. I loved him. The realization was as stark and undeniable as the gunfire. I loved this dangerous, complicated, grieving man, and I might lose him before I ever told him. After an eternity, the comms crackled to life. "Safe room. Report." It was Lorenzo's voice, breathless but steady. Gianna grabbed the handset. "Secure. Leo and Alera are safe. Status?" "Perimeter breach. Neutralized. They're falling back. Stay put until I give the all clear." A pause. "Ilara?" Gianna handed me the handset. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. "I'm here. Leo's here. We're okay. Are you hurt?" "I am fine." His voice softened. "You are sure you are both unharmed?" "We're scared, but we're okay." "Good. Brave girl. Stay brave a little longer. I am coming for you." The line went dead. It was another hour before the all clear came. The bolts on the door slid back, and Lorenzo stood there. He looked like a vision from a war zone. His shirt was torn and smudged with soot. His knuckles were raw and bloody, and there was a fierce, cold light in his eyes that spoke of violence barely contained. But he was whole. He was alive. He didn't speak. He strode into the room, his eyes finding me instantly. He came to me, and without a word, he pulled both Leo and me into a crushing embrace. He buried his face in my hair, his body trembling with released adrenaline and fear. I clung to him, Leo safe between us, and for a moment, we were just three people who had narrowly escaped the storm. "They will pay for this," he murmured, his voice a raw vibration against my temple. "For frightening you, for threatening my son. This ends now." He pulled back, his hands framing my face. His eyes searched mine, seeing the terror, the relief, the unmasked love I could no longer hide. "You are my heart," he said, the words simple and devastating. "Outside this room, both of you, you are my heart, and I will let nothing touch you again." He kissed me then, in front of Gianna and a recovering Bruno, a kiss of possession, of relief, of a vow sealed in fire and blood. It was not gentle. It was a claim. The cleanup took days. The villa bore scars, a blown-out window on the east wing, scorch marks on the marble floor of the grand hall. 6 of Lorenzo's men were dead. 12 Moretti attackers lay in the morgue. The city's underworld held its breath, waiting for the retaliatory tsunami. Lorenzo was gone for long stretches, the business of vengeance consuming him. But when he was home, he was different. The wall was gone. He sought me out not just for Leo, but for me. He'd find me reading in the library and sit beside me just to be near. He'd wrap his arms around me from behind as I prepared Leo's bottle, resting his chin on my head. The physical connection was constant, grounding, as if he needed the tactile proof that we were safe. One evening, a week after the attack, he led me back to the terrace. The city lights twinkled, indifferent to the war that had raged in its midst. He handed me a glass of wine. "It's over," he said quietly. "Vittorio Moretti is dead. His operations are dissolving. His family is broken. The news should have horrified me. A man was dead because of the chain of events that Started with me spilling my bag in a car. But all I felt was a cold, hard relief. The threat was gone. And us? He turned to me, setting his glass down. Us, he said, as if the word was a new precious thing. Ilara, I have lived my life by a code. Power, respect, family, vengeance. I have built an empire on it. But in the past few weeks, you have shown me a different code. Compassion. Strength in gentleness. A love that builds rather than destroys. He took my hands in his. I do not want to offer you a life in the shadows. I want to offer you a life. With me. With Leo. But it cannot be here, not like this. Not with this legacy of blood. My breath caught. What are you saying? I am saying I am done. The Santoro family will pass to my cousin Marco. He is hungry for it, and he is of that world. I have made arrangements. The Council of Families has approved my retirement. On one condition. He took a deep breath. That I leave. That I take what is most precious to me and disappear. For the stability of everyone. Leave? To where? Anywhere. Switzerland. A quiet village in New Zealand. A ranch in Montana. You choose. A place where I can be Lorenzo. Where can you be, Ilara? Where Leo can grow up knowing sun and mountains and peace. Not walls and bodyguards and vendettas. It was a fantasy. A beautiful, impossible fantasy. You'd give up. All of this? This? He gestured to the palatial villa in the city skyline. This is a gilded cage. You and Leo, you are the open sky. I am choosing the sky. Tears streamed down my face. Just like that? Nothing about this is just like that. It will be the hardest thing I have ever done. But for you, for our son, it is the only thing. He cupped my face, wiping my tears with his thumbs. I love you, Ilara Ricci. I think I have loved you since you glared at me in that car, soaked and defiant. Will you? Will you build a new life with me? Will you be my wife? He didn't have a ring. He had something better, a future, a real one. Not as a nurse in a Mafia lord's house, but as a partner, a mother, a wife. I looked at this man who had fought his way out of hell to offer me heaven. I thought of Leo, asleep inside, who called to a maternal instinct I thought had died with Mia. I thought of my own heart, shattered and now beating so fiercely for them both. Yes, I whispered, the word breaking on a sob of pure joy. Yes, Lorenzo. 1,000 times, yes. He kissed me, under the vast, starry sky, a kiss of promise and beginnings. The city of Milan, with all its darkness and danger, lay at our feet. But we were no longer looking down. We were looking out, together,